we just got done watching Civil War 2024, and I want to discuss the movie a little bit. So we're going to talk about the movie, and then I might move into a spoilers phase, but I'll give you warning before we get into any spoilers. I need to be clear on two things, crystal clear on two things. One, this is only my opinion. I'm offering my opinion, my reaction to the movie, and that leads into the second thing, seditious conspiracy. This is not seditious conspiracy. When we're discussing Civil War, we're talking about the movie, right? There's no intent to encourage or plan any disruption of the real government, right? Civil War, we're talking about the movie Civil War, not any real civil war here. I think that is very important to make that distinction for obvious reasons. So, having shared that, we got back from the movie, and you're wondering, did we already give away the best part, the opening screen, right? Was there more to it? Is there anything else worth watching, or was that as good as it got, right? So the story itself, we'll kind of jump back, set the stage, right? The story itself is about a group of reporters. I believe they were in New York in a civil war, right? Civil war environment. You had the government forces holding Washington, D.C., and then you had the rest of the country. They seem mostly focused on what they call the Western Alliance, which is an unlikely alliance between Texas and California that appears to have arose up to overthrow the government, right? That's the pretense of the movie. I don't think I'm giving any spoilers there. Group of reporters from New York want to go to D.C. to interview the president, right? In this fictitious movie, the president, the government forces don't like reporters, right? The reporters are shot on site, so in that sense, it's a suicide mission to D.C. to interview the president before the country, the Western forces overthrow D.C., right? Once again, pretense of the movie, a lot of stuff along the way. I will add that as far as I can recall, there was no mention of Republicans, there was no mentions of Democrats, conservatives, liberals, anything like that. So it is up to your imagination. Who was the president, right? Who were the Western forces? Who was the government? There may be some hints, there may be some clues, and I will offer my opinion on who I think the writers were suggesting, right? It's pretty clear to me who they were suggesting maybe was the president in the show. But we'll get to that, right? Moving forward too quickly, maybe. So they're on their journey, this epic journey to D.C., and they're traveling through a war-torn country full of racist hillbillies, maybe ignorant hillbillies. That seems to be the vast majority. It feels like the government forces are all kind of crazy hillbillies, but then they bump into other crazy hillbillies that maybe aren't government forces, but don't like them that much anyway. What's the opening scene? Let's talk about the opening scene. Very dramatic, right? You have a suicide bomber holding an American flag, running at a group of police, screaming, then a detonation. That's the first couple minutes. Suicide bomber detonates into a crowd of police, wiping them out. Clear the imagery, right? A lot of imagery here. And I would assume the overall intent of the movie would be to show that Civil War is bad, right? Any kind of war is bad. You see a war-torn America, people living in camps, gunfights going on around the country, bodies stacked up by crazy hillbillies. Once again, I may have mentioned crazy hillbillies. They seem to like to portray crazy racist hillbillies in the show. Once again, though, they did, I think, make an effort to stay away from naming any party. Was it good? We saw it in IMAX. There was some good action, right? Without giving spoilers, good action, good story. I think it's worth going to see, right? So having said that, I'm going to switch more into spoiler mode, right? If you're just wondering, is it worth watching? Sure, It's not a woke lecture. I will say that. It did not feel like an overt woke lecture or anything like that. I know that's something people get tired of in movies now. It certainly wasn't that. So if you want just some action, you want to see some stuff get blown up and people running around shooting and going on missions, in that sense, good movie, right? Moving on from that, back into where I might start giving some spoilers just to kind of share how I felt about the movie, how the movie made me feel as a person, and how I think even though they did not name any political parties, and I think that was intentional, they gave hints, right? And we'll talk about some of those hints. So, first hint right off the bat, right? The group of reporters that are going to D.C. to interview the president before the government forces are finally defeated, one of the questions they float is ask the president how he feels about having abolished the FBI. And you wonder, sort of a subtle hint, right? Sort of a subtle hint of who the author may have modeled the president after in the movie. They mentioned 3 terms, so obviously someone gets into the presidency, hates the press because apparently they're shooting the press on sight, abolishes the FBI, and some point leads to a situation where America rises up against him, ultimately ending with the assault on D.C. by the Western forces, the collapse of the government, and ultimately, once again, spoilers, warning, they take him out. Execution, right there on the floor, after he begs for his life. Of course, they ask him for his last words, and he begs for his life. But there's a whole journey getting to that point. A lot of graphics, blowing up stuff in D.C., tanks in the streets, helicopters in the streets. The fearless reporters. Once again, I know people are like, oh, reporters are the good guys. That's ridiculous. I didn't catch on necessarily of them being the good guys. It's just them following the story. And in fact, I would say they were so focused on getting pictures, they didn't care if their own people got killed, right? It was just all about, you got to get that shot, take the picture. It doesn't matter that someone just died, that your own people just died. They were just focused on getting that picture, I guess getting the story right. I believe the reporters were from Reuters. I'm pretty sure that's what they had said. Once again, coming from New York, passing through a lot of America, which they tend to mock along the way. They went into a small town where there was no war. They made a big deal like, hey guys, don't you realize there's a civil war going on? What are you doing? Like the people in the town were just idiots and oblivious trying to live their lives. Certain obvious, overt, right? Where they're like, oh, those small town people are idiots. They don't even know there's a war going on, right? And once again, different sort of hillbilly racist characters that you meet along the way. You've got some government camps, and you've got people, happily living their lives in these government camps along the way. I don't know. Is it worth watching? I mean, it's an interesting idea, right? I do believe they were going out of their way, once again, to not overtly name, it's Civil War, right? You can walk into that territory of seditious conspiracy, which is not the intent of the movie or the intent of the video, right? We're talking about fictitious. So they kept it fictitious. Texas and California joining forces. Well, you couldn't find any 2 states that were more politically divided. Once again, setting that fictitious pretense, which, hey, obviously those 2, if something were to happen, no one would expect those 2 states to be on the same time. They don't explain why they're on the same side, right? There's really no effort. I guess it has nothing to do with the story. The story really is about getting the story. The story is about getting the story, following the reporters that want to interview the president in the movie before he's taken out by the Western forces, which ultimately he's taken out by the Western forces. And the reporters get to do their final interview, as I said, where he begs for his life. So it does not paint rural America in a very good light, right? It really doesn't. Like, hey, we're in your town. Well, why don't you understand that there's a civil war going on? Why are you guys just trying to normally live your life? You know, it talks about, oh, my parents are on their farm and they're pretending nothing's happening. Oh, yeah, no, my parents are on their farm. They're pretending nothing's happening. So it's all that's in there, right? It's what you would expect. A lot of action, certainly if you like the action. A lot of messaging in there, right? You know, they didn't mention who they saw, you know, which side is which side, but they couldn't help but hint at it, right? You can see which side is which side based on the hinting. It gives you a insight into the minds of the people that made the movie. So, was it worth watching? You know, I thought it was a good movie, right? We're looking at it as a work of fiction. None of that's not to be expected, right? You would expect anything like that in any movie that's made nowadays. It's interesting idea, interesting movie. Good action. We saw it on we saw it on the IMAX. You get the helicopters and the tanks assaulting DC. I mean, who would expect to see that in a movie? The forces descending on DC and the gunfights as they storm the White House. So quite an interesting movie. You know, is it worth seeing? Sure. You know, why not? Get your entertainment, escape from reality, because we're not talking about reality here. So I hope that helps out. I think that's about all I had. You know, it's interesting they switched to Canadian money. That was one point. The suicide bomber in the beginning running with the American flag as your imagery from the beginning. Wanted to share that point. Interesting movie. Once again, you know, it's going to be quite a year. I don't know that it's going to be as, say, predictive as the Leave the World Behind, where they show the ship losing power and then not only months later an actual ship loses power, runs into the bridge. Let's hope it's nothing like that, because that wouldn't make for a good year, right? So once again, I hope that helps out. As always, thank you for watching, and we appreciate you.